Go Jackers!
Welcome to a special, oh so special edition of Rec Talk today. It's a video that a lot of people have asked for, possibly millions. I'd have to look at my email. I think millions of people have asked for this video. Today we're going to talk about NIL, transfer portal, and bowl opt-outs. And people, there's no middle of the road opinion for most people here, right? It's either, hey, these kids are adults, this is a business, this is exactly the way it needs to be. And then there's other people who are saying, this is ruining college football, this is a disaster, college football will never be, worth watching again, though those people will continue watching college football like I will. So I want to talk about what I think needs to happen moving forward. How do we make this maybe a little more manageable? But first I want to talk about how we got here. What happened that led us up to this point to where this seemed necessary, whether you agree with it or not. So first, how did the NCAA even come about? Before, I don't remember the name of it. It was like the Intercollegiate Athletic Association or something. But what started happening? And I think this first organization was formed in like 1907. And they used this term student athlete, right? People were dying playing college football. We didn't have the equipment that we have today, and people were getting basically maimed, horribly injured, and there were people dying. Look this up. There's multiple, probably 10, 15 court cases that parents of kids that died playing college football levied against the schools because the schools would not pay for anything associated with these injuries or wrongful deaths. And what did the school say? Well, no one's forcing them to play football, right? This was their choice. This is a voluntary thing. They're a student athlete. So we formed the NCAA as a way of protecting players from this kind of thing. It's one of the reasons among several, but we needed a body that was really going to protect these kids. So now you do have to pay for medical expenses for your athletes. This seems reasonable. They're playing football for your school. Certainly you should incur any expense associated with them playing football, injury, feeding them, whatever. So time goes on. Obviously you're not allowed to pay players anything other than their scholarship. And this is the main, or maybe not the main, this is one of the more prominent arguments of like, well, they've been getting paid the whole time. They get their scholarships. But back in the day, you didn't have these massive TV contracts. You didn't have football programs that net and or profit hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Millions and millions of dollars of merchandise sell. And one thing, so I'm thinking of like when Georgia played Alabama in the national championship. What was it, 2016 or whatever? It's when they had Jake Fromm. And I remember watching it. Now, these players can receive nothing other than their scholarship and whatever. I think there might be a small stipend associated with the scholarship. So they put in the national title game, millions and millions of people watching this game. They have Jake Fromm, his picture up, and then they have like a Gatorade symbol right under it. And I'm thinking, man, this is kind of messed up because they are profiting from this kid using his name, image, and likeness to advertise for their product. So in the last 10, 15 years, we start seeing, look, the Big Ten just signed, a $2 billion TV deal. That's like probably $100 million for each school. Is it fair to only compensate these kids with a $40,000 scholarship, let's say, for the 4 years that they're at the school? The other thing that used to be allowed is you could basically bar a kid from transferring to another school. So it was always set up that you had to sit out a year. So basically you lost a year of eligibility and you could transfer. So it used to be, look, a coach takes another job somewhere, new coach comes in. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to name any names. And they could bar you from what schools you could and couldn't transfer. Now, these are student athletes, though. I thought these were students first and foremost. That was always the argument. But when I was at Georgia Tech, if I wanted to transfer to a different school, Georgia Tech didn't provide me a list of teams or of schools that I couldn't transfer to. But somehow when you play, particularly football is where this was done, probably basketball too, you could tell me where I can and can't transfer, but the coach can take they didn't have $100 million deals for coaches at the time, but I could take a $50 million deal, leave everyone high and dry, and go anywhere I want. Now, how is that fair, and how does that make any sense? And I've talked about it on previous videos, but you look at, I don't know, like a Todd Gurley that gets banned from, I don't remember how many games because he was selling his autograph, but a memorabilia salesman, he can sign an autograph and they can sell it. You can't sell your own jersey even. It got so far out of hand. To my knowledge, you could not even take, if you were coaching a team, you couldn't even take your team out for like a nice dinner. That was an NCAA recruiting violation. And a big problem for me was how selectively these rules were applied. So getting back to transfer, you could be granted basically a free year or a free transfer in the day. It wasn't automatic. You had to get a special waiver to do this. There was like hardship waivers, medical waivers, like your mom is sick, you want to go back to a school close to see your mom. And help out with her. The NCAA would grant these waivers to some people that it made no sense for, deny it for others, and they never were required to provide a reason as to why one kid was accepted or one kid was denied. And I'll flat out say it. What that was about was what was going to make the most money for the NCAA. In 2016, the NCAA made approximately $1 billion in revenue. So they are incentivized to let kids transfer to schools in big markets with big TV contracts that are going to make a lot of money. JT Daniels gets a waiver to come play for Georgia. He's from California. He's playing for USC. Gets a waiver. Justin Fields gets a waiver to go to Ohio State. And there were other kids that had like legitimate medical issues with their family, denied waivers. No explanation given whatsoever. So these are some of the reasons as to why I think it was necessary to give kids, all kids, basically a free year to transfer if they wanted. Now, does this create issues? We're seeing it now, right? In conjunction with the NIL deals, you have to recruit your team almost year round. Now, we changed that to where now there's 2 periods that you can enter the transfer portal and basically field offers. So I was a proponent up until NIL and this portal rule was enacted that this needs to happen. I felt like schools were really exploiting these kids because you look at a kid like I think Lattimore, the running back that played for South Carolina, because a lot of people are saying, well, look, these kids that are stud athletes that everyone wants to watch. They're going to go to the NFL anyways, make a ton of money. What about that kid? Has a horrible knee injury, basically breaks his leg, ends his career right there. But how much money did South Carolina make off the kid? Is that right? Is that fair? He was never able to profit off that. The kid, I think it's Michael Orr. A lot of you probably don't know this. The kid they made The Blind Side about. If you look into his reaction to the film, he's very critical and basically says, "Why did you make me look like an idiot? Like, I'm not an idiot. I just came from a bad situation, and I needed some people to show me some love, compassion, and care, and work with me and give me the tools that I needed to be successful." And I was thinking, well, why didn't he say anything when they were making the film? The truth is he couldn't. They angled that film to come out around the time he was drafted. And the NCAA rules were that he could have nothing to do with that film. He couldn't profit. He couldn't give any input because of the name, image, and likeness restrictions that were on him. So he had to wait until he was basically drafted before he could get anything for that film. Meanwhile, all these other people are making a ton of money off of it. It ended up being a wildly successful film. That is crazy to me. You know, this kid comes from a horrible situation, makes something of himself, becomes an absolute top-level tackle taken in the first round. People are making a movie off of his story, and he can't even be involved with it because of some rich people at the NCAA don't like it. All I'm saying is that is the reason I think that we had to start moving in this direction because kids were being exploited. Now the other side of it is, well, that only applies to a very small percentage of the kids, and a very small percentage of the schools make a ton of money. And that is true. But there's always kind of been these have and have-nots, especially in today's college football. There's teams that have a lot of money and resources and don't, and that's not going to change. So here we are today where you get 1 year of basically a free transfer, right? You can transfer anywhere you want. You don't have to sit out a year. And the school can't pay you anything, but you can take name, image, and likeness deals and be paid by boosters, or I believe companies even, like businesses can enter an NIL deal with you. What I don't like about it is, again, how I don't think that the schools have to publish what the total NIL money that they've given out is. They start a collective generally, and I think the kids work with these deals with these different people. It's not all that clear to me how it works. One change that I think needs to happen is that every school has to publish, and it has to be public, how much NIL money collectively their team received. Because I don't want to single kids out, but I do think we need to know, well, how much did Alabama pay in NIL money? How much did Texas A&M pay in NIL money? I think that's one thing that needs to happen. The other thing that I think needs to happen, because look, if you're in Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, take your pick of the top programs. I just get tired of always seeing those teams in the playoffs and being successful. You know, the majority of teams that people root for are not one of those teams. So I think we need to cap how much total collective NIL money a team can disperse to its players. I don't know what the number is, but we have to find a way. I mean, this is why I don't like Major League Baseball, is because there's no salary cap. And that's kind of what college athletics has become, is it's really now like a minor league for the professional league. I think that we need to have a salary cap for NIL money. And that would prevent, the same teams or the teams with the most money from being able to just scoop up everyone, and it would make it more competitive. So that's one change that I think we need to make. I think that would really help with the a lot of these NIL issues. I also think, as far as changing things in the transfer portal, a big issue that I'm seeing right now. And by the way, the capping NIL is going to help some of this portal stuff, because if a team would have hit its cap, they're not going to be able to offer much or anything in NIL to a player. It'll make it more competitive for all the teams. Major problem I'm seeing right now, and I caught a lot of flack for my opinion of the Deion Sanders and how he handled his first few days there. A major problem is that when a coach leaves a school and then takes the best players from his team with him, and look, let's set Deion aside for a second. When Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma and took the head coaching job at USC, how likely do you think it is that he contacted Caleb Williams about transferring before the portal opened up? There's, in my opinion, a very small likelihood, but here's the thing. There's no way I can think of that you could ever prove that unless these people were dumb enough to record it somewhere, to send it through a text or an email, which who would be dumb enough to do that? If you're smart enough to coach a Division I football team, I would think that you're smart enough not to make some dumb blunder like that. So one change I would like to see, and I don't know which one of these options I would like to go with. One thing you could do is, if you go, like if Caleb Williams plays at USC, he's not eligible for the free transfer year. He would have to sit out a year. So if you follow your coach somewhere, you have to sit out a year, because there has to be a way of basically penalizing that when you could never verify that it occurred anyways. The option I probably like more is that there's some penalty on what NIL money that you can take if you follow your coach somewhere. So let me come back around on that on another transfer thing, or NIL thing, because it's going to be interesting for me to see how this evolves. When you come to a school, and I think this NIL needs to be kind of funneled through the school on some level. It would have to be if they capped it, but will we start seeing NIL deals where when they sign, whoever they sign with says, hey, if you transfer away from the school, then the contract is void, you have to pay the money back. Or this gets back into the bowl opt-out, which is what I think should happen. If you are not injured and opt out of a bowl game, I think NIL deals should be structured such that you have to pay all that money back, right? We're paying money for you to sponsor our brand, or come here and play for our team in the bowl game too. So, restated, one thing that would help with the bowl opt-outs, my solution to the bowl opt-outs is, if you have any NIL money, it's forfeit. You have to pay it back if you don't play in the bowl game, if you opt out of the bowl game. And I think you could do the same thing as if you follow a coach somewhere, or if you transfer, just be like, hey, this NIL deal is good. To qualify for this NIL deal, you have to play for a certain number of years at the school. So maybe there'll be NIL deals that say, hey, it's a $30,000 NIL deal. If you end up transferring before your third year, you have to pay it back, or something like that. We have to have a way of kind of reining this in. And I guess what I'm saying is that I think massaging the NIL and kind of reining that in is the way to do it, and using the opportunity to get NIL money as a penalty for some of these things that are really killing. Okay, apologies, because I didn't formalize this well. You can see I'm editing the video now. And I think it's brilliant. This is what we do. The NCAA creates a stipulation that all players who receive NIL money, and you could put a threshold on it, so above $5,000 or $10,000, something. The number's arbitrary. Must place some percentage, let's say 60% of their NIL money, in an NIL escrow. I'm not going to worry about how you structure all these things, but you create an NIL escrow that's mandated by the NCAA that is held until certain conditions are met. This is how things work when you buy a house, right? You put certain money in escrow once you get to a certain juncture. That way, if you back out of the deal, it's a way from keeping you of wasting the seller's time. They retain the money in escrow. So you could have conditions like, this is how you solve some of the bowl opt-outs. So if you opt out of the bowl, you're not injured and you're eligible, you lose everything that you've put in escrow. Or, if you leave, before you've played 2 full years at a school or 3 full years, you lose all the money that's in escrow. I think that's one way you could kind of start clawing this kind of craziness back and reining it in. And, that fixes some of the transfer portal issues too. Now, a criticism of this is going to be, well, not all players are receive NIL money, and the bigger schools are going to be the ones still dishing out the most. The point being that you start penalizing some of this craziness, right? And if you're opting out to go to the draft, you have to pay a penalty for that monetarily. If you're opting out for the draft, I would think you have NIL, a larger NIL deal anyway. So you have some incentive to play the game. The reason that you would opt out is because you don't want to get injured in that bowl game and hurt your draft stock. So at least you could compensate that with something financial the player has already earned. So we're going to get back to the video. I had to cut this in. Let me know what you think about that. So those are my thoughts about it. I certainly don't want to just do away with it entirely, and I know there are a lot of people that are. But I think there's a lot of people that are kind of in my camp where, like, hey, I want to keep it, but we've got to start, chipping away some of this stuff that's not working. We got to start kind of rewriting some of these rules. So those are my thoughts and opinions on it. Guys, let me know what you think. Is NIL transfer, is this all nonsense? Is it great? We don't need to change it at all. If there are changes that you think need to be made, what do you think? But those are my 2 cents worth. Thanks for watching the Rec Talk video, and we're going to keep on keeping on. We'll see you guys later.